This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country and join their calls for justice. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
The world is getting more dangerous, Tom, and I feel like I've punched through that realization out to the other side. The question now is, what do you do about it? And yeah, I would rather go down fighting.
If you want the goal for life, free marijuana, vote Greens.
There's a bunch of ratbags and a bunch of idiots, and I got no time. I'm a bunch of idiots.
The Greens get way too good a run in the Australian media, way too free a run.
Frankly, I've always found the Greens to be a real serious danger.
Hello everybody, it is Serious Danger, a podcast about green politics in Australia for Sunday, March the 29th in 2026. It's only March. This year feels like it's gone fucking forever. This is not an official Greens Party podcast. It's produced by Michael the Griff Griffin, Tom Ballard here with you, coming to you from Naarm on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people. Hope you're good. This week's guest emerald is a climate activist, a criminal, a terrible, evil criminal who breaks the law and has no respect for the rule of law in this country because he hates Australia, clearly. You probably know him from his incredible work organising with Rising Tide, and he's about to embark on the global Sumud Flotilla, taking food and supplies to Gaza because that's just the kind of guy he is. Zack Schofield, hello, welcome to the show.
Hi, Tom. I've never been introduced quite that forcefully before, but it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I've been watching a lot of Sky News stories about you in preparation to have you on the show. I guess it all just kind of seeped in. You are a self-described general troublemaker. Again, I'm sure lots of people listening to the show will have seen you pop up in the media. Perhaps, why don't we start with, was it last year you were caught vandalising Tanya Plibersek's office in January of 2025? Tell us about that.
It would have been December 2024. I remember it well because it was just a couple of weeks after port blockade in Newcastle in November 2024. Yep. Yeah, Tanya Plibersek, then Environment Minister, just approved 4 new coal mines, or arguably coal expansions, but we're not going to get into the semantics because at the end of the day, new coal is new coal.
Yes.
Tanya decided to get into semantics and at that same moment claim that the Labor Party had not approved any new coal mines in her entire tenure, which even if you take it at its most generous is a lie. And certainly if you include all of the many, many coal expansions that she had approved, was, simply not even close to the truth.
Misleading.
Well,
at the very least. Misleading.
I just reckon that Australians actually quite like it when you call out politicians for their bullshit, and just tell it how it is. And so I made the snap decision after consulting a few comrades to buy a can of red spray paint and go to her office the next morning and do that action and then hand myself into Redfern Police Station. They were surprised that I didn't have a single phone or a credit card or a piece of paper on me. I just gave them the can of spray paint and let it all play out. But
that I did it. You spray painted, just for the record, you spray painted the word liar
that's
on
right.
Tanya Plibersek's office and then had yourself in. And then what happened with that? Do you get charged with what, vandalism?
Oh,
or
absolutely.
damages?
Absolutely. I was expecting a vandalism charge, which is quite minor, but I actually got a malicious damage charge, which for any of you budding activists out there, in New South Wales, if you do vandalism with intent, it counts as malicious damage. Any sort of political motivation behind it, and you're up to charge with a maximum penalty of I think 5 years. Of course, I didn't get that. No one would get that. I got off with a small fine of I think $200, and a conviction. I think it was well worth it, and I think people should do it more often. To be honest.
So if you just done like a dick and balls or whatever, you'd get a lesser charge than if you wrote something political, like a political message.
I believe that's the case, unless they could prove that the dick and balls was a politically motivated dick and balls.
Sure. A queer rights kind of thing or something. I don't know. Okay, great. And then also people may be familiar with you. I remember seeing this interview and being stirred. The leftist bones within me were just deeply inspired by the fact that in November 2024, again, I believe, you went on Sky News into the belly of the beast and had a chat with Laura Jays. And it was this incredible performance in the face of one of the most hostile interviews I think I've ever seen in my whole life. You basically broke it down, presented a very calm and reasonable response to her ridiculous questions. If people missed it, here's a little taste of it.
You're essentially saying to people without any new coal and gas that they're going to have to pay maybe double or triple on their electricity bill just to support your cause.
Not at all. No. Solar and wind power is far cheaper.
No, it's not.
Hunters.
It's actually not.
I'm
not
sorry,
right now. It's not.
Well, it will very much will be. China is rapidly decarbonising, right? Korea, Japan, these are our main export trading partners, and they are rapidly choosing to move to domestic energy production through renewables or domestic coal production. They are. And so the Port of Newcastle actually says that the coal export market could collapse within the next 10 years. So what do we tell Hunter workers? What do we tell people in Singleton and Muswellbrook when their own port says that the export industry will collapse in 10 years? Are we going to fund those communities to transition to alternate industries? I think we should. Do you?
It's hard to know where to start with that answer for a start, because I don't want to buy into some mistruths. And look, it's not just by you, it's by members of the government as well who keep on repeating this line that renewables are cheaper. They're just not at the moment. And they might not be for many decades.
I think the coal and gas industry have bought out a lot of politicians, and there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of money in these really powerful energy companies.
Who?
There's a lot of interest in these powerful energy companies. Who have they bought?
I mean, that's a big claim, Zack.
We've seen, they pay millions and millions of dollars in donations. We've seen we've seen politicians go into cushy energy corporation jobs.
The Greens are the ones that accept these enormous donations as well.
No, they don't. They don't accept any corporate donations. That's on their policy website. You can see exactly who donates to them.
Just wonderful stuff. Very calm. And she seemed to be panicking over the very concept of the fact that you had answers to her ridiculous questions. That particular clip has been viewed 1 million times online on YouTube already. I think it's probably gone viral lots of different other places. Tell us about talking to Laura Jays.
I think I felt the hand of God in that interview, Tom, to be honest. Everything just lined up perfectly. And it was on the Monday of the 2024 blockade. We just had about 170 odd people arrested for blocking a coal ship. We actually caused one to turn around that was inbound to Newcastle. And I'd gone to the Newcastle courthouse to see some comrades as they were being released from being held overnight. So I just found a little corner in Newcastle courthouse, plugged in, and got to work. I'd never done a hostile interview like that before, but I had lots of practice with cranks calling on my number, which unfortunately you can still access on the Rising Tide website. So,
oh no.
But it was an amazing opportunity. I'm very grateful to Sky News for letting it happen. And I tried to get on a couple of times since then. Often it's gone up to the level of producer. Sometimes we've locked in an appointment and then they've cancelled at the last minute.
Oh, that's weird.
I don't know what's going on there, yeah.
Yeah, maybe you're too smart and reasonable and you know your facts, so we can't be having people from the left like that on Sky News. Get some insane, enthusiastic blue-haired university student who can crumble under questioning from a 55-year-old man on a 6-figure salary. But someone who's young, informed, really gives a shit and blows up the bullshit behind the line of questioning, we won't be having that on Sky News, thank you.
Yeah, the thing I just want to, because I've learned a couple of things out of that interview, and one of them for me was, whenever I'd get really irritated at Laura, I'd start talking to the audience. And there are a couple of things like, I know that people at home are really feeling it in their hip pockets. Like, I understand that. And your viewers at home might really like to know that, China's doing X, Y, Z. Like, just speaking through the bastard works really well. And I think if you're ever able to take that position as like the sensible, reasonable adult in the room, you should, right? Because we say that we're on the side of fact and reason and humanity and all of these good things. Like, we should claim that, I reckon, and really prosecute the case in a way that serves the purpose.
Stephen Colbert once said, reality has a known left-wing bias. So facts are on our side. We may as well use them. How was Rising Tide 2025? Of course, we were at 2024. We did a live show there. We covered a little bit briefly, I think, on the show last year. But yes, how did it all go down, this new blockade under the new Chris Minns Imperium and even more stringent restrictions on the right to protest and block that coal port?
It's so funny, Tom, because we actually, from an internal perspective, might even say that the policing of 2025 was de-escalated from 2024.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You still have massive amounts of cops on the water and on the beach and, being very intimidating as they're wont to do. But there are just a couple of ways that they interacted with us which were de-escalated. They didn't try any theft as they did in 2024 of kayak paddles. And generally speaking, and I don't want to speak for everyone because people may have had bad experiences, and that's, part of what the police do in New South Wales is they give people bad experiences because they're bastards. But in terms of the overall policing of the event, we think it was a bit de-escalated, and we think that's because they realize that they can't stop us. Right. And at a certain point, the policing strategies are politically determined. I think they realized that the more they pushed back and the more they, arrested people, we're really good at telling the story. And we got heaps of media. We got heaps of media in 2024 about, this massive police escalation, all of these arrests. In 2025, we started our actions. Usually we sort of don't break the law or do anything. And I say we advisedly. Rising Tide is not encouraging people to break the law, but people go there for a purpose to protest, right? So generally speaking, that doesn't really happen until perhaps the Sunday afternoon. This year, people started going into the shipping channel from Saturday morning and started turning around coal ships from Saturday morning.
Wow.
We were the most disruptive we've ever been. Our Greenpeace comrades locked on to a ship that was anchored offshore and held it up for about 8 hours. We then went into the channel on Sunday afternoon with hundreds of people, turned around another coal ship, and it came to a point where the police just stopped arresting people. There was a point at least where we think about 100 people were in the channel being disruptive and not being picked up by the cops. And I'm not sure what the operational decision was there. If I was a commander trying to minimize the political impact of our event, I would have done a rough head count and told my boys that we didn't want to arrest more people than were arrested the year before because it just plays really well in a headline. So what that meant was that we actually shut down the Newcastle coal port 2 coal ships in 2025, at least from Sunday afternoon. And I had the pleasure of calling the CEO of the New South Wales Port Authority on that Sunday afternoon to explain the situation to him. He was not. I didn't hear his voice being angry. I heard him being very tired. And I explained that we had the capacity to close the port to coal ships for the rest of the day. We saw that there were a couple of ship movements still scheduled. But if those were rescheduled to tomorrow, we would get off the water and let the other non-coal ships progress through the port, which is something that we've always said we want to do. We don't want to shut down the entire piece of infrastructure. We want to, make our point and repurpose it.
You're very similar to the Iranian regime in the Strait of Hormuz. Really,
well, hang on. You're going to get me put on a list. Not that I'm not already on a list, but you're going to
You're
bump
on
it up.
so many lists, bro. You're on all the lists.
At the end of the day, he called me back in about 5 minutes and said, yep, no more coal ships today. So we had a celebration. We got off the water, and then I believe it was a ship carrying aluminium from time ago went out the heads. So I would call that a roaring success.
Yes.
Not everyone is on our side, obviously, but I think giving it a red hot go and doing bold things that actually get in the way of billionaires and corporations and those politicians that no one really likes, even if you're on their side, sort of, it gives you some respect. People look at you and take you seriously, and you're like, oh, well, maybe I don't, believe exactly what they believe, but they're giving it a red hot crack. And I think leaning into that sense of agency and sort of being quite unapologetic, strategic, but unapologetic about what we're doing goes a long way.
Absolutely. No, it's an inspiration every year, and God bless you for doing it. We'll crack onto the show proper in a moment, but I suppose just broadly speaking, what are your politics? How do you identify politically? How do the Australian Greens fit into that, if they do at all? I mean, are you a revolutionary socialist? Do you worry about those kind of labels? How do you think about that kind of stuff?
Look, I personally, I'm a pipeline guy, right? Like I would try to avoid labels because I think at the end of the day, what we're trying to do on the left, I'm certainly on the left, but what we're trying to do is recognize that there are two sorts of power in this world. There's organized money and there's organized people. We don't have the money, but we can have the people. And what's necessary to get those people is to make doing what we think needs to be done as reasonable and accessible and as easy as possible for people to start to restructure their lives around actually taking agency back from the bastards in power and start to dictate how this world works. I don't necessarily think that putting a label on myself makes me the best pipeline guy to get people from point A to point B as I can be. And I don't think everyone needs to be. I'm not anti-labels. And I very much value the support of the Greens. I mean, the Greens have been a massive, probably our biggest institutional supporter as Rising Tide. I want to give a particular shout out to Sue Higginson, who, New South Wales MLC, who has been one of our lead police liaisons at every single blockade and just a very, very reliable comrade and backstop when required. But the whole Greens Party and particularly Newcastle, massive allies. But we need as many people as we can possibly get, right? And so that's sort of my goal is to try and make it as understandable and as possible and as attainable to start breaking some rules that need to be broken, start building some power that needs to be built. And it's certainly some variant of left-wing politics, but I'll leave the precise definition to people who are a bit more academic than me.
Does building power include running for parliament? Is that at all on your agenda or wish list, or something you can see yourself doing one day?
It is not on my agenda or wish list. No, and I think we need people. I mean, electoral politics is really important, right? Like I don't want to dismiss. I'm not anti-electoralist. I think you need both. You need electoral and non-electoral politics. The great thing about elections is that people, when election time comes around, are thinking about politics when often they're not in their day-to-day lives, at least, many people. And so you've got this amazing window of opportunity where you can start to talk about how the world should be and how we might get it from here to there. And even if you're not winning seats, I think, winning seats is very important, I think. But even if you're not, you've got this amazing opportunity to prosecute your case as strongly as you can. And I think that's something that's, for example, an organization like Rising Tide is not best suited to do. I really do think that function follows form, right? You institute yourself as an organization that does X, and it's very hard to change that, midstream, because people join your organization with the understanding that they're going to do X as well. That's what attracted them to you in the first place. So to try and suddenly do Y is not necessarily the best way to go about it. That's why a movement ecosystem with lots of different groups, each fitting their niche well and working well together is really important. So I'm not planning on running for parliament, but I don't think we need to. And I think the niche that Rising Tide is fitting at this point in time is one that has been long unfilled in Australia, being a direct action organisation that has a very explicit goal of mass movement dynamics and is aiming to, we try and make our demands and our messaging as reasonable and understandable to as many people as possible while still being, essentially radical, demanding, if people don't know, the end to all coal and gas approvals, a 78% tax on fossil fuel exports to fund transition and climate loss and damage, which essentially is a complete and total restructuring of the Australian economy, because let's face it, that's not happening anytime soon, and stopping exporting fossil fuels by 2030. And now these are all things which are materially possible. Whether they're politically possible at this point in time is a question, but you could theoretically do them. They're not impossible things to do. And so making that case that, hey, it would be really fucking good if we did these things, and here are these interests which are dictating otherwise, and they're saying, well, actually, no, you should be satisfied with your measly 5% royalties and your burning planet. Those people, you should be happy with this. We're like, well, actually, no, we think that you should disrupt the hell out of these guys. And my pitch going further than that would be that participating in sort of direct action, but just community building with a purpose just makes your life better anyway. Like it brings you friends and relationships that are much deeper than you'd otherwise have. You build skills, you build all sorts of interesting experiences. And I think that's borne out by my experience of Rising Tide and also seeing the movement grow.
Well, also fun. That was the thing that struck me when I went to Rising Tide. You actually had fun. Like there was fucking music and there was a festival vibe and there were people from genuinely all walks of life. Of course, the media would like to dismiss all these people as professional protesters or hippies or whatever. It's like, no, people from all across the community coming together to, yes, be very serious about the thing they really care about, but also having a little bit of bloody fun. And that's what we do here at Serious Danger as well. So it's a perfect
there you go.
On the show, we're going to chat around some of the big stories of the week. We're going to whip through them. There's a war going on. Never forget that. That's going on. People are going on strike. And if we've got time, I want to chat more to Zack about his upcoming trip on the Flotilla to Gaza. I think that'd be really interesting. Quick shout out to our patrons. Thank you so much for supporting this show. Declan, Stefan, Gary, Gus, and David, we love you. For just $3 a month, you can get bonus content from here at Serious Danger and help us make the show. Your support is what makes this show possible. Patreon.com/Serious Danger AU. The latest Patreon episode is with Professor Toby Walsh on AI and data centers. Really fascinating conversation. Also, thanks to all the feedback we've got from the bonus episode we put out. I had a chat to Marcus Strom. I don't know if you know Marcus Strom, who's in the Labor Party, Zach. He's in Labor Against War. We thought we'd have a good conversation talking about this idea of Labor members within the party trying to make the Labor Party less pro-war to try and end AUKUS. Have you had much to do with the Lean World, the Labor Environmental Action Network, Labor members who are trying to do change from within?
No, I'm afraid I can't say that I have. I've commented on their Instagram posts a couple of times and they tend to ignore me.
Okay. Not fans. That's a shame. Well, thank you to Sean, the patron, who gave this really interesting comment. This was a really interesting discussion. The underlying disagreement seems to be that Tom believes being a member of a party is an endorsement of that party, but Marcus sees party membership as merely the mechanism for engaging with the party. That is why Marcus says Tom's objection to Labor membership is moralistic, since he doesn't see membership as having strategic value. I would think Tom's position is informed by his experience of being a Greens member, where a lot of organising effort is around convincing people to vote for the party. And to do that, you have to like what the party does and justify their actions on the doors. But then I don't know why the same isn't true for Marcus. I'd be really interested to hear how Marcus feels door knocking or handing out how to vote cards, knowing that it's essentially asking people to vote on a hope for a future version of the party that doesn't exist yet. How could you possibly believe all these terrible things about what the ALP is doing, but still rock up to a booth and say, yeah, nah, vote for these guys. If we're lucky, we'll have good policies 3 caucuses from now. I think that's a really good point. That's on me, Sean. I really should have followed up with Marcus and said, okay, you agree with me about all the terrible things the ALP is doing. You're trying to organize and, do power faction stuff from the inside to change their position. But when come election time, are you out there door knocking and saying, vote for the Labor Party and trust in our internal efforts to turn around this warship? And we know they're complicit in a genocide, but vote for them this time and trust me, everything will work out in the future. That's probably a really good point that I should have followed up with Marcus. Anyway, if you haven't listened yet, please check it out. I think it was a great conversation. Totally free on the free feed. Recently, Serious Danger gets involved in Labor Against War. Okay, let's have a look at the week's news. Of course, we recorded last week's episode before the South Australian state election. No doubt everyone's been catching up on the wash-up. Were you following the South Australian election very closely, Zach? Did it interest you in any way?
Not very closely, but it does interest me, and I have seen the fallout of it. Of course, the rise of One Nation is the thing, right, to talk about, whether you think it's a rise or not.
Yes, well, I'm interested in that. Just briefly laying it out. Again, this is recording Friday morning. 71% of the vote across the state have been counted. Labor actually suffered a 2.4% swing against them. Still landed on a primary vote of 37.4%. They've won 33 seats. The Malinauskas Imperium assured. Liberals suffered a swing against them of 16.4%. Pretty extraordinary. Reduced to a primary vote of 19.3%. Looks like they're going to end up with just 4 seats. The Greens are claiming it as their best ever result in the state. Their primary vote was at 9% in both houses last election. Looks like they're going to be around 10.3% in both houses. That means Melanie Selwood will be joining Robert Sims in the Legislative Council. Robert Sims is still hopeful that the party may win a second upper house seat. That's still TBC based on looking at some of the results on Friday morning. I don't know if that's going to happen. Tammy Franks, the former Greens MP who ran as an independent, has not been successful in her campaign for re-election. The lower house seat of Hayson was the target seat. This is perhaps the Greens' one chance to break through in the lower house. Candidate Genevieve Dawson-Scott has got a swing of almost 3% for a primary vote of 22.5%. In theory, the Greens could still come second on a primary vote and maybe win on Labor preferences, though at the moment, at least this morning, the ABC is still calling that as a Liberal win. So we'll wait and see. But yes, the big story, the thing everyone was talking about was this kind of massive swing to One Nation. 20% swing. They got a primary vote of 22.3%. They're going to get at least 3 upper house seats, including the return of Cory Bernardi to politics, which we love to see. At least 1 lower house seat. The lower house seat of Najuri, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. I assume this is Ghana language. Primary vote of 34.7%. Quite funny to me that the One Nation seat is a seat that is in a First Nations language. As far as I can tell, Cory Bernardi's entire campaign was him walking around Adelaide, pointing at stuff that had been named in traditional languages, going, how fucked this? This is stupid. Why do we need this? Anyway, that seems to be at least the one lower house seat that One Nation will be picking up. By my calculations, the upper house will have something like 9 Labor, 6 Libs, 3 One Nation, 2 Greens, and the former One Nation, now independent upper house member, Sarah Game, which means if you need 12 votes to pass stuff, the Labor government might need either the Greens and Sarah Game for more progressive legislation. Zach, your thoughts? What do we make all this? Is this the beginning of the One Nation wave that's coming for all of us?
Well, I'm probably one of the worst people to ask, not being an electoralist myself, but I do feel for our South Australian comrades who are, looking at these results and asking that question. I mean, we have seen the rise of obviously MAGA, reform in the UK, around the world, far-right parties are building power at varying paces, with varying success. And One Nation is doing quite well because they've had this massive injection of funds, right, from Gina Reinhart and I believe other sources. But they are doing things that work. And I fear that when we talk about One Nation, we often have a tendency to try and dismiss them to make them, seem like less of a concern, or try to dismiss their voters as simply motivated by racism, which I think is largely true. But again, the fact remains that we need people to change the world, right? And, on the left, we need people to change the world. We have to take very seriously what ordinary folks, working class folks, are being motivated by. And One Nation is doing the Nazi thing, right? They are picking up on seemingly progressive economic policy language, which they'll never enact into actual policy. But, I'm pretty sure beyond the racism, the immigration rhetoric, the second thing I saw from them earlier in the campaign was talking about a 25% export profit tax on gas.
Yeah.
And that's something that the Australia Institute and David Pocock have been pressing for. It's a slightly more reasonable version of what we're asking for in Rising Tide. And One Nation, they have no principles. They're completely opportunist. They are bought and paid for by the billionaire class. They're meant to, funnel disaffected working class people into a party that will not challenge capital. Like, these are things that we know. They're doing it well. And and we have to acknowledge that, right? Like, it's a good thing that they're massive, that their 22% vote share only translates into a couple of seats. Yes, Labor mopped up very easily. Yes, at the moment, they've currently just decimated the Liberal Party, which, I try not to smile at too much. But the other day on Facebook, one of Pauline's posts that blessed my feed was entirely talking about how Labor is the party of capital and wealthy investors. And, they used some demographic data to suggest, I have no idea how true it was, it's probably bullshit, but that like more educated and wealthier voters vote Labor and working class voters vote One Nation because Labor is controlled by big business. And And I think Labor's controlled by big business too. I think, probably not as much as the Liberal Party, but Labor is showing big business that Labor is winning. So big business has an incentive to work with Labor, and vice versa.
Right.
So this is a dynamic that is real. History doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. And we've seen this before. We've seen effective working class left-wing economic rhetoric being paired with the most virulent, racist, evil shit that you can think of, as sort of like honey and vinegar in a way. I mean, there's the carrot and the stick, and it works. And the counter to that is not to dismiss both of those things. The counter to that is to dismiss one of them and then go much harder on the other.
Right.
Is to go much harder on the actual left-wing economics, the actual working class policy, and point out that I think is starting to be done, that Pauline is billionaire owned, and that she's not going to make your dreams come true, and that the sugar hit of racism is going to make your life worse. It is going to make your life worse. And in the absence of an actual left-wing governing party, I mean, arguably it's the Greens' job, among others, to prosecute that case as much as possible. But, arguably we also need other actors in the space who are not the Greens, who don't come with the baggage that the Greens hold for some working class, rural, whoever's.
Yeah.
Like, that's just a fact that I think we have to acknowledge. It's a tough situation for us to be in, but yeah, the Labor Party is not. Well, it's all of the things that you said it is. Unfortunately, it's a pro-genocide, pro-corporate, hardly democratic institution where many of its members have been essentially conned into thinking that it's going to change. It's not. So the question is, where does Australia go from here? I think the Greens have to be part of the answer, but I think, to be honest, we need to take a fighting stance and prosecute the working class case with a lot more passion.
Well, yes, I know there's a lot of crossover with Lamestream listeners, with Osman Faruqi and Scott Mitchell. They had a great conversation this week on their Thursday show about where the Greens are at and why, a few theories, I suppose, or at least some questions about why Greens can't seem to capitalize in this same political moment, right? If things are so bad and people are so disillusioned with the status quo and the current system that they are turning to the One Nation, why is that reverse side not true? Why aren't people also turning to the Greens as a left-wing answer to how dire things are? That's a good question. It's probably a question we should solve on this podcast. But anyway, I can't do everything, guys. But let's turn to the war. The war is still going really, really well. Again, that's as of this Friday morning. It's going really well. So things could change. I was saying to Zach before we started, a genuine risk that between now and Sunday morning, of course, Donald Trump will have done something insane. He seems to be conducting the war on the weekends so as not to disturb the markets, which is, I don't know what late stage of capitalism this is, but when you're doing the war on the weekends to not disturb Wall Street, that's a pretty dark place. US President Donald Trump has warned Iranian officials to consider his 15-point peace proposal before it is too late. And Israel has announced it has killed a top Iranian naval commander. Trump on Thursday put further pressure on Iran to accept the US peace plan, warning at a cabinet meeting that otherwise will just keep blowing them away. Pakistani officials handed Iran the United States 15-point proposal overnight, which is believed to address reopening the Strait of Hormuz, sanctions relief, and reducing Iran's nuclear program. The White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, has said the 15-point plan was never confirmed and that talks with Iran are continuing. Again, great to have a really clear idea of what's going on here and how the negotiations are going. We've had further attacks. Kuwait's defense ministry confirmed it had detected multiple incoming threats in the past 24 hours. This is on Thursday. The United Arab Emirates said it engaged 15 ballistic missiles and 11 drones on Thursday. Concerns are mounting over Israel's potential long-term occupation of southern Lebanon. Yes, I have many mounting concerns about that, actually, as it trades fire with Hezbollah and sends ground troops deeper into the country. Now, that's called an invasion to any normal person. I believe Associated Press have just officially declared or changed their style guide to recognize what Israel is doing in Lebanon as an invasion. And of course, the death toll from the war has risen to at least 1,500 people in Iran, over 1,000 people in Lebanon, 16 in Israel, and 13 US military members, while millions of people in Lebanon and Iran have been displaced. There's so much news on this front. Almost all of it is bad. Zack Schofield, what have you been making of the West's fight for peace and liberty and justice in Iran?
Well, it's the collapse of an empire, right? You know, it's the lashing out of the US and Israel. I mean, I think it's heartening to see that in the US, this is a terribly, terribly unpopular war.
Yeah.
It's heartening to see, I'm not sure if these are confirmed reports, but it has been coming across, my desk, reports of sailors on the USS Gerald Ford, I think, if not one of the other aircraft carriers, destroying their plumbing systems, stuffing shirts down the toilets.
Right.
To disable the internal plumbing. And
wow.
I think there was a report of some bunk beds being set on fire, general sabotage essentially. And
mutiny.
this is mutiny.
Yeah.
Well, good. And not that I have any faith in, it's very hard to have faith in laws, particularly international laws these days. But I think laws at their best do come from a general sense of natural justice. And, I think any sense of natural justice says that when you're told to do evil things, you don't do them. And you actively revolt against the people telling you to do evil things. And the more of that in this world, the better, right? It's just a terrible tragedy that this attitude seemingly has to be provoked by the evil to begin with. But I'm not sure how else I'm a history student, but other than that, I'm talking pretty well out of my depth. All I'll say is that you have to deal with the world as you find it, not as you wish it would be. And I think we, over the last couple of decades, at least in our parents' lifetimes, in the Anglo-American Empire, have had it pretty good. There's been a long series of decades of relative peace, and when we go to war, it's expeditionary excursions where we go and do war crimes somewhere else. But for people at home, it's been pretty stable, actually. And that is a historical anomaly for many people. Like, the world is dangerous and chaotic. And, when the good times have come, they've really often only come because ordinary people have stood up en masse and demanded it and made it happen. And one could argue that, I'm getting way too academic now, but I mean, the rise of communism in the 20th century helped provide sort of a counterpoint to empire and capitalism that scared a lot of governments into being less shit, because there was this undercurrent of popular mass movement, revolutionary energy, which could come crashing down if they pushed too hard. We don't have that at this point in time, and so. This is the way the world is going. So my challenge is, what the fuck are you going to do about it? And I think, stuffing your t-shirt down the toilet of the USS Gerald Ford is a really good start.
That's a good start. Yeah.
But I'm just praying for people in Iran and Lebanon and all civilians, really, because the killing of any civilian anywhere is an evil. But numbers matter. And so when you've got an aggressor state killing lots of civilians, then that's worse. That's the evil to be looked at.
Yes. Well, I stand with the brave people of Iran against this oppressive regime, but I don't want them coming here to claim asylum. That's my position. I echo the position of the Australian government.
Yeah, well, you should join the Labor Party.
Indeed. Maybe I will. I mean, we this sort of story was forecast a couple of weeks ago as they rushed this legislation through. The same week they're falling over themselves to try and offer asylum to the Iranian women's soccer team. But yes, this week, officially, we found out that it's going to be a 6-month ban. Thousands of Iranian travelers have been barred from entering Australia for 6 months under a government ban targeting people who might overstay their visas, prompting criticism by refugee advocates and some crossbenchers and anyone with a soul. The snap ban, in effect as of Thursday, will block more than 7,000 people already granted Iranian visitor visas from entering the country. Described as brutal and unfair by the Greens, Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke said it was a response to the conflict in the region. There are many visitor visas which were issued before the conflict in Iran, which may not have been issued if they were applied for now, Mr. Burke said. Decisions about permanent stays in Australia should be deliberate decisions of the government, not a random consequence of who had booked a holiday. Now, it's actually not a random consequence of who had booked a holiday. If someone comes here on a visa and it claims asylum because they'd face persecution or death back in their home country, that might actually have something to do with either A, the oppressive regime which you say you hate so much, Tony Burke, or the war that you actively support because you've backed in these illegal missile strikes from Iran and Israel, from Israel and the US, excuse me. So actually, it's not just some people booking a holiday and then try to cheat their way to asylum. You actually play quite a key role in this. And if you had any consistent principles or gave a shit about people in Iran who are escaping this regime or flee or just scared to go back to their country because of a goddamn war, then you could not in any way morally justify this decision. Sorry, that's a rant.
Well, no, I feel you. I suppose I have a general tendency to no longer. I mean, the joy that I used to find in calling out hypocrisy for people like the Labor government is no longer something that I wish to waste my time on, because fundamentally they're not. I mean, I don't think they're hypocrites in the truest sense of the word, because they don't actually believe any of the good things that they ever say. They're doing exactly what their job is, and they know exactly what their position is. And I don't know, they don't obey sort of fairy logic where if you catch them in a lie, you get to change their behavior. They're just bad people, and they're motivated by they're motivated by factors. Even if they weren't bad people, they're motivated by factors which are in such tension with each other that they're never going to do what is right for humanity, because they're not motivated by what's right for humanity. They're motivated by power.
The fundamental contradiction, right, of the idea of a liberal national or international order, of human rights, of international law, the idea that you can commit to that while also 100% backing in anything that the US and Israel does, refusing to criticize them, further enmeshing us with their imperial war machine. I mean, it's just a fundamental contradiction. We all know it's bullshit. And you're right. Calling out the hypocrisy does nothing, but it feels good and it fills time on a podcast. So what am I supposed to fucking do here, Zach?
Well, yes, I don't want to get you put on a list, Tom, but I'm sure
I'd
you're
love to
there
be on
anyway.
a list. I need more promo. I'm doing the Melbourne Comedy Festival. If that takes being listed as a terrorist, I'll take it. Just in case anyone cares, Australians aren't actually stoked about this war. Sydney Morning Herald had a poll on March 19th, had 61% of respondents saying they thought that Australia should have nothing to do with this conflict. And this week we had a Guardian Essential poll that said when it came to the US-Israeli airstrikes on Iran, just 26% approved of them, 43% disapproved. Only a third of respondents supported Australia sending a military plane and troops to the region. In America, I mean, polls sort of vary wildly. This is from a poll aggregate site that I found that had opposition to the war reaching 54%. I mean, you will find other polls that are dramatically more stark than that. The choice between people who are into this war and who aren't. The don't know or not sure vote is pretty massive out there too, which we exactly can't read as a full-throated endorsement of this fucking shit show. Again, I know this is stuff we all know, but deeply depressing, right? Like, we're constantly told that our politicians just follow polls, or they're scared by polls or whatever. But apparently when it comes to foreign policy or war crimes, the political class doesn't give two shits what ordinary Australians or the public actually think about their involvement in these conflicts, right?
No, of course not, because they're measuring. I mean, they're measuring, if we want to be really simple, two opposing influences on them. Any opposition that the Australian public might have to any foreign policy decision has to be weighed up against the opposition that they would face from the US if they did what Australian public wanted them to do.
Yeah.
And this is something that Gough Whitlam faced, right? Like, no more Pine Gap, thanks very much. Yeah, we want to renationalize, all of the land that you've bought off us, and et cetera, et cetera. Oh, look, a coup funded by the CIA.
Yeah.
John Kerr did as he was told by his handlers. I mean, I might sound crazy, but you can look it up. This is matter of record, right?
Yes.
But that's not a reason. I mean, I hear that from I suppose the friendly Geordies camp of the Labor Party suggest that means, well, it's sort of a lost cause, so you kind of just have to do what the US tells you. Fuck no. No. I mean, and there has to be a line, right? Like, if the US, I mean, domestically, I think I would be really surprised if there weren't death camps and mass graves, to be honest, at this point in time, because of the ICE raids and the massive rounding up per quota that they're doing of people who look non-white based on metrics that are given to them by Palantir, for Christ's sake. Like, I would, as someone who has done a little bit of academic history, I'd be really surprised if there weren't already unmarked graves. And the question for us has to be, where is the line? There has to be a line. If there's not a line, then we are condemned to hell. Yeah. And I wish the line was I wish we'd already crossed it and we changed our foreign policy. But if we don't say that, then we could be led down into the worst depths of evil, as has already happened. So for those people who think that US threats of intervening in our government if we actually did the right thing are too much of a burden, well, that's life. You just have to pick your fights, and I think we need to pick some fights.
Yeah. No one suggests it's going to be easy to disentangle one from fucking US imperialism, but as you say, it's an empire that's dying. And what is the fucking alternative? Like, yes, we are just trying to do the thing that everyone says they support, which is a country that is sovereign, that can make its own decisions, that the government is always constantly telling us that despite what you see and read about AUKUS, no, we're still totally in control. Australia's sovereign. We get to make our own decisions. We're doing it in the Australian way, as Albert loves to talk to us. You go, well, fucking prove it then. Actually prove it. Get these bloodthirsty Yanks off our soil, and let's actually remove ourselves from this death spiral that is the US war machine. Anyway, that's my thoughts. Of course, the energy crisis looms. The International Energy Agency is telling us this is going to be a worse energy crisis than the 1970s, which, again, if you're a student of history, changed literally everything, like ushered in the neoliberal order because of the deteriorating economic conditions of the 1970s because of the 1973 oil shock, when the OPEC countries, jacked up the price of oils in protest of US support for Israel in attacks. Isn't it crazy how this stuff comes round and round? We had an amazing moment from Foreign Minister Penny Wong in the Senate this week, in which she tried to blame the spiraling costs of energy, oil barrels shooting up, petrol stations running out of petrol, on Iran.
And the weaponisation of the Straits by Iran is impacting oil and fuel prices worldwide. And what this does demonstrate, colleagues, is the willingness of the Iranian regime to inflict economic pain on households and businesses across the world. And I'll take the interjection from the Australian Greens, who seem to forget that the consequences for global energy markets are as a consequence of Iran engaging in attacks on civilian infrastructure, civilian and commercial shipping. So you may want to minimise that, Senator. You may want to minimise that.
Jesus Christ. Okay, so just ignore the fact that US and Israel struck Iran in contravention of all international law, completely unprovoked, supported wholeheartedly by the Australian government. No, the problem why prices are going up now is because of that evil Iran regime. These people are so evil, Zach, they won't even let us just bomb them without responding. Isn't that evil?
Yeah. I think it shows that, there's lots of things that it shows, but Christ, renewable energy generation capacity, very important for energy security and national security. It's kind of crazy that apparently, half of our economy runs on one supply line, or at least can be influenced by it to such a great extent. Maybe that's not the best way to run an economy. I don't know. I think it makes a lot of people money. But is it good for anyone else? It's just such a basic thing to acknowledge, right? And there's going to be so much propaganda out there blaming the Iranians for everything that happens at home, right? That's what Wong's doing. But that's not how the world works. Like, that's a coward's answer to blame, all of the problems on one country, even if they weren't being illegally bombed.
No,
it's just not good politics. It's not smart, and I think we need to call it out for what it is, which is a coward's answer. Your refusal to take responsibility.
The weaponization of oil. I love that too. Like, how could they possibly bring oil into this conflict, or their control of the Strait of Hormuz? How dare they?
In the Middle East?
In the Middle East? How could we have
Crazy.
predicted that when the US and Israel bombed Iran, it would somehow affect global oil prices? Who could have seen this coming? And apparently they had no plan for this at all. Okay, the information we're getting out now is the US had no plan or did not predict or didn't even war game the possibility that Iran might actually close the Strait of Hormuz in response to being attacked by the US and Israel. These are the geniuses that are leading this conflict that we have absolutely thrown our lot in with. I mean, how disgraceful. On the energy front, I mean, you mentioned this idea that there's been this sort of revival in the idea of a 25% windfall tax on gas exports. Of course, we know they're going to make shitloads of money out of this, as they did with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. We talked about it in last week's show. The Greens tried to pass an amendment through the Senate, introducing such a windfall tax. That was voted down by the parties. Now Treasury has asked for modelling of that kind of tax. Even One Nation is on board this idea. Do you think that, again, not that I'm welcoming the war whatsoever, but do you think a consequence of the war will be greater popular sentiment from the Australian public and from people in Parliament saying we got to get a better slice of this action while these evil companies are making out like bandits?
Yeah, well, it feels really grim to look for the silver lining, and I feel a bit reluctant to do so. But if that was an outcome of this scenario, then Christ, it's better than if it's not.
Mm.
But I mean, this is what we need to be arguing anyway, right? War or no war, we need to be arguing that the corporations who currently make billions and billions and billions of dollars off Australian resources, which destroy our planet, just shouldn't do that maybe. And that if we're going to ship those things overseas, then we as the country, we as the people should be getting all the profits, if not almost all of the profits.
That's 78%, I'd say. That's 78%.
Well, about 78%. Let's start there and see how we go. And
that's our floor. That's a floor.
and use that money to build a better economy that is not planet destroying. I mean, but I think what I've found is, completely absent the war, because Rising Tide, we haven't really been engaging. We don't talk foreign policy, and it's not our place. Like, I just want to be clear that I'm talking as me rather than as the organization. Is that we found our best success, and I found my best success in talking to punters, typically middle-aged men, but not always middle-aged men, when we talk economics and when we talk supply and demand and when we talk energy security and when we talk a fair deal for Australians. I mean, people really respond to that. I think people are crying out for this conversation to be had publicly, because we've been so beaten down by this logic of the market and logic of capital and profit dictating ordinary people's lives, that I think people are primed for this conversation one way or another. And I think we really just need to run at it full pelt. I've had people, after the Laura J's interview, I got a text a couple of weeks later from a guy who said that he was essentially a climate denier. He saw my piece and then he did his own research on, I think it was rooftop solar and the cost and benefit to him of rooftop solar.
Yeah.
And he found that it was so much better for him. He had the capacity to pay for it, right? But if you've got that, so much better for him in the long run to transition to renewable energy on his own account, and then started to question all of the climate denying nonsense.
Oh, wow.
Because you start to, there's sort of this school of hard knocks, common sense brigade sort of attitude that, you just follow the money. I think that's right. You do just follow the money. Like there is a wisdom, I think, to the common sense brigades. It's just so often twisted into nonsense by vested interests who play this game really well. But if you start to follow the money and then realize that actually solar panels are really good for you and you probably should get an electric vehicle and, it's going to be much cheaper for you in the long run, then you're like, well, hang on. Maybe all of this nonsense about the climate crisis not being real is in the vested interests of the energy corporations that I'm going to be ditching because they're worse off for me economically. Like, you start to do the same thing as the One Nation people like to pretend they're doing, but you actually use the facts.
Yes.
And I think that's a really positive thing that we should be running at, war or no war. I mean, I think it's an absolute tragedy that we have to consider using the war as a motivator for this argument. But if that's what needs to be done, then we're in this position and we need to be saying these things anyway.
Well, I mean, surprise, surprise, I give a shout out to the Greens. I think the Greens have been unequivocal and really, clear-sighted on their position on the war. They think the war is bad and a disgrace. And they've been fucking great at doing that. But also, on the Instagram this week, they laid out sort of a vision about easing cost of living. We know that this cost of living crisis is about to get worse. We know the price of everything's it's already going up. People are already running out of fuel, and that affects everything, yada, yada, yada. So they posted Greens plan to ease the cost of living because you didn't ask for this war, but you're paying the price. And so they said right now we could be making price gouging illegal, taxing the gas companies, regulating the banks to make sure they don't profit out of these interest rate rises, which are also insane, cap and freeze rents, free public transport, make childcare and mental health care free. Right now, they funnel the profits of the war to the 1%. The Greens will tax the 1% and fight for you. Now, people will recognize a bunch of those positions are already Greens policies. But yes, I think that's a chance to do both, to say this war is a disgrace and evil. Okay, we're going to have this cost of living crisis. Let's make sure that ordinary people who are already struggling don't pay the full price of this goddamn war. And in fact, we take money from the people who've got heaps of it to make life better for everybody else. So I like to see that. Ballard endorses this approach.
Endorse. I'm shocked.
This is huge breakthroughs this week.
So the lovies at the ABC decided to go on strike. Yes, those hard-working, Trump-hating TV presenters and vegan news anchors and reporters, climate-obsessed murder people,
All right, we don't have heaps of time, but just briefly, I mean, I thought it's important to give a shout out to the fact that we saw some really cool stuff this week, which was workers realizing their industrial power. We had the ABC staff going on strike for the first time in 20 years and Victorian public school teachers for the first time in 13 years. I was going through the city on, on Tuesday, I think, when the actual strike happened. Red T-shirts everywhere from the AEU. There was a guy who was naked out the front of Parliament House. I don't know if he was supporting the strike, but I totally saw his dick and balls, so that felt like something. And for 24 hours, ABC staff coming off the air, really massive deal. I'd just be interested in your thoughts on what was it like seeing this kind of industrial action. Strikes are so rare, particularly at that kind of level in Australia, because of all the hoops and incredible restrictions on our right to strike in this country. It was, I found it quite a stirring thing to see.
Absolutely. And I think the great thing about direct action, whatever extent it is, whether it's a strike or whether it's blocking a coal ship or whatever, is that it reminds you that you can, that taking these actions may have consequences, there may be restrictions, but you can do them. And I would love to see more strikes. I'd love to see illegal strikes, wildcat strikes. I mean, building the political capital to do those things is not easy. You can't just magic them into existence. But it's really good to be reminded
capital of money to pay the fines that you will be charged. Yeah.
Absolutely. But the fact that you see people do it is like, oh yeah, maybe we could all get together. And it's inspiring to people beyond just the unionists that are taking that action and solidarity to them.
Yeah. Hands down. I'm wearing my little MEAA cap. So hopefully ABC staff can win a better pay increase and a job security as well. It seems like a massive problem across the ABCs, these really short-term contracts. Apparently ABC was sort of struggling to maintain on air. I think the station manager in Sydney had to present some of these programs, kept making mistakes when he was throwing to people. That's pretty funny. Managing director Hugh Marks doesn't seem to be handling it brilliantly. He sort of described the staff playing silly games, describing this industrial action, which seems pretty insulting and a pretty demeaning approach to his own staff. And yes, in Victoria, apparently the education state, and they're the worst paid public school teachers in the country. So solidarity to you all, and I'm thinking of you. It's good stuff.
We are sailing again to break the siege.
And this time, we're sailing with dozens of boats.
And with coordinated mobilizations from 44 countries around the world.
All right. Gosh, so much news to talk about. We're going to wrap up the episode pretty soon, but we should absolutely acknowledge the fact that, Zach, you are heading off on the Flotilla very shortly, in the next couple of weeks, heading over to Gaza to deliver much-needed food and supplies. Tell me about, for people who don't know what the Flotilla is, they might have seen, some other folks trying to break various blockades during the genocide in Gaza. Tell us a little bit about the Flotilla, how you got involved, what the plan is.
Yeah. So the Global Sumud Flotilla is a collaboration between many different international organizations of volunteers, humanitarians, aiming to get food and medicine and aid workers to Gaza via the Mediterranean Sea through this illegal Israeli blockade of that territory, the naval blockade. You probably, if you're watching this, know what it is. You would have seen the last one in September last year, when about 40-odd boats with hundreds of international activists sailed straight for the territory and then were picked up by the Israeli Navy, jailed for a period of time. I believe there were 6 or 7 Australians, depending on how you cut it, who were in that mission at the end of it, but there were many more who were involved in preparation and in earlier stages.
This is the one that Greta Thunberg was on, right?
This is the one that Greta Thunberg was on, yep. So one of those Australians was Juliette Lamont. I know her through activist networks. She's from the Northern Rivers. She's insane, very, very staunch, and has ended up, well, you kind of have to be, right?
Of course.
And ended up as the lead organizer for the Australian delegate of one of these international organizations that is contributing to the flotilla. It's called Global Movement to Gaza. Anyway, she reached out to me earlier the year and asked if I wanted to be on it. And I'm extraordinarily privileged, Tom. I mean, I've got this bank of experience with Rising Tide. I'm supported to do activism nearly full time. You know, I sing sea shanties every Monday night in Sydney. So to not take this opportunity would have felt a bit dishonest, really. And I think there's dozens of Australians going this time. I mean, I'm aware of, there's a lot of different moving pieces to this massive grassroots humanitarian effort. But from Sydney, we've got Ethan Floyd, and Newcastle, Jaden Kitchener-Waters, amazing First Nations artist who got fired from his public service job by Chris Minns.
Oh, wow. He's amazing, yeah.
Yeah. Annie Mokato's a non-Zionist Jewish activist in Naarm. Clementine Ford is going as well.
Wow.
Surya McEwen was on the last flotilla. I believe this one will be his 4th go around because other attempts to break the blockade have been made in the past. He's a veteran. There are many, many people. I can't shout out all of them, but there'll be a really strong contingent going. And yeah, of course, the aim is to get that support to Gaza. If we are stopped, then the aim is really to tell the story of the fact that Israel is going to break international law and lock up all of these non-violent, humanitarian activists to prevent food from getting to a starving population that they are trying to kill. And the thing about direct action, which is different from other forms of protest because you're directly putting yourself, in the way of something or in a hard place, or using your agency to expose a particular dynamic of power. It's really effective because when it's a person that it means more to you. And I don't think this is, I don't want to be moralistic about this. Like, it's just the case that we as humans tend to care more about things if we know a person who is involved in them. And that's part of the human experience. Like, I don't want to shit on anyone for that being the case. But the great thing about the flotilla is that we are aiming to have 1,000 or more participants from across the world who are all doing this thing. And so the storytelling potential of that effort is so deep because there are so many individual networks that all of those people have in their home countries, which will be extra motivated to put eyes on Gaza because of those personal connections and the political pressure that can be levied in every one of those countries against Israel, or at least against their domestic government to cut ties with Israel, is amplified and escalated by that. Now, the flotilla is not the only way to do this, but I think it's a really strong tactic. And I also think that, we have a chance. I will not say a strong chance, but we do have a chance to break the blockade and get some ships through, because of the 40-odd ships last time, a couple did slip through the first sort of wave of the blockade and got within eyesight distance of Gaza. And this time we're anticipating to have over double the number of ships, over double the number of participants. The thing that brought, well, a lot of things bring tears to my eyes these days, but I saw an article a couple of weeks ago saying that fishermen in Gaza during the time of the last blockade, had some hours of reprieve where the Israeli ships pulled away from the shore to intercept the activists, and they were able to go out and fish for a few more hours.
Yeah.
And so regardless of what the actual material impact is, and I hope that it is real, I hope we do get through, but the narrative and storytelling effort of this flotilla, I think would be very hard to replicate with any other way. And I guess it's incumbent on us and our movements here in Australia to use this moment as effectively as possible to put as much pressure on our government and build as much public support for the flotilla and for Gaza as possible, so that down the line we can stop sending them F-35 parts. You know, we can stop inviting their president here. We can stop covering for them in the UN. And that is, I mean, that's the logic of our flotilla from the Australian delegation. Let Palestinians live, get aid to Gaza, get Australia out of Israel. We are in this conflict. We support one side of this conflict, this genocide. We support one side of it as Australia. Stop doing that. We need to stop doing that. And I think we need to tell the story here at home that we are involved. Like, it's not like, you know, helping Palestinians makes us more involved. All we have to do to make a really material difference is be less involved, is to get out, is to stop arming and funding and supporting a genocidal state. That would be of a massive help. And then let's talk about getting aid to Gaza as a country. But in lieu of that, we're going as representatives and as individuals to make it happen.
Are you scared?
Not yet. I'm sure I will be. But
because there was shit, you know, like I mean, as you said, Israel broke international maritime law, like going international waters and boarding these ships. Again, no condemnation from Western governments about that, weirdly, and then subjected, you know, members of that flotilla to what seemed to me to absolutely meet the definition of torture in the course of their while they kept them in custody. Right? I guess that must have been consideration in going through your mind when you agreed to do it. Right?
Yep. I feel. And we'll see how it holds up under pressure. But I feel psychologically prepared for the worst case scenario.
Right.
Because I'm a climate activist, right? And I think, you know, James Hansen, NASA scientist, if, you know, arguably one of the most correct predictors, it's not a consensus position, but he and other scientists are saying that by the end of the century, if we don't change course, we're looking at a 90% fatality count of the human population. By the end of the century, which is quite close to the end of our lifetimes, right? And the world's going to look very, very different over the next couple of decades. I think that's a massive motivating factor for me, because what else do we have? You know, other than running at fights and helping your neighbor and trying to make the world a better place actively, what do you have? I would rather try and do this now when it seems worthwhile and strategic and like it actually might help some people, rather than have the fight arrive on my doorstep later down the line, which it will. Like the violence and the brutality will come home when, you know, resources start to become scarce. We've already seen these massive mega corporations like Palantir prepare, you know, AI kill chains and whatnot for drone armies so that they don't have to put any human consciences in the way of their profits and killing people who stand in the way of their profits. Like, the world is getting more dangerous, Tom. And I feel like I've punched through that realization out to the other side. The question now is, what do you do about it? And yeah, I would rather go down fighting.
Well, this is from Rising Tide's post on Instagram about you joining the flotilla, sort of drawing a few connections. Witnessing the horrors unfolding in Gaza demands that we stand up for justice and humanity. Rising Tide stands 100% behind Zack and everyone taking part in the flotilla. Our fight for climate justice is inseparable from the fight against war, colonialism, and oppression. In places like the Hunter, governments and industry are already proposing that the transition away from fossil fuels should mean shifting workers into weapons manufacturing and the defense industry. We reject that future. A just transition must move us away from both fossil fuels and militarism toward a world that values life, dignity, and collective care. Beautifully put, and couldn't agree with that sentiment more myself. If people want to support you or the flotilla, Of course, they can always go to risingtide.org.au. But for the Flotilla immediately, is there stuff that people can do to help out?
Yeah, the biggest thing to do would be to follow Global Movement to Gaza.AUNZ. There are also other Flotilla delegations. I know 1,000 Madeleines, Australia, is another delegation from this continent going. Follow them on Instagram or Facebook, or check out the website, because the call to action will be to call DFAT or your local minister when we do get intercepted, if that's what happens, to help put pressure on for our release. Also, just go to the rallies that get called. I mean, I don't want to be opportunistic, but you do have to use moments of momentum to really push the case. And I would feel like that's part of why we're going, right, is to provide a hook for people to rally around. It sucks that it needs to happen, but you got to get it done, right? The other thing that I'd like to invite people to is if you're in Sydney on Wednesday, the 1st of April, come to Addy Road at 7 p.m. I'm putting on a fundraiser gig. It's going to be sick, free entry, and no money required, really. I just want to have a real awesome community party, and it's been so awesome to see grassroots musicians and organisers just line up around it, help make it happen. We've got 4 amazing artists from Sydney and also the Bahaa Dabbagh dance group from Gaza who's arrived in Australia about a year ago, teaching everyone how to do the Dabbagh, which is going to be really phenomenal. So come along to that. It'd be great to see you.
Great. We'll pop the details of that and those other links that you mentioned in the show notes if people want to check it out. Zach, thank you so much for giving up some time and talking to me on the show. Solidarity to you and all the other comrades heading out in the Flotilla, and thanks for all that you do. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Tom. Pleasure to be here.